Hello and welcome to our May edition episode of Christian History Chronicles. This is the extra super deep dive that we do each month with the Center for Christian History, in addition to what we do for our podcast of This Week in Christian History. We like to have a deeper dive to be able to talk about various issues and try to use maybe some time frames that might be when we can have it that way, to be in connection to whatever it is that we're talking about, if it fits an anniversary. So we are extra glad to have today as our guest Dr. Evan Lenow, who is the head of the Christian Studies Department at Mississippi College, and which you would note, and we obviously are proud to be able to note that not only are he and I talking to each other today from a grand total of about 40 yards from each other, okay? But just because neither one of us could figure out how we could do the technology to get us in one room. So we just decided it was easier to do that. But we're going to talk about kind of a unique structure about how churches bring in the sheaves, right? How they bring in the tithes and what that's all about. So we're going to talk about the cooperative program that is used throughout the Southern Baptist Convention, which is a pretty unique vehicle that all kicked off in May of 1925. Dr. Leno, thanks for coming and joining us.
It's great to be with you, Nick.
Absolutely. And I should also say we are very grateful for the time that and your good word and good name that you have put in as being on our administrative advisory board for the center. It's really made a big difference. And so an extra thank you for all of that. So talk about the cooperative program of the Southern Baptist Convention. What the heck is that?
Yeah, so the Cooperative Program is the funding mechanism for the Southern Baptist Convention to really, at the end of the day, to accomplish the mission of the church and the mission of the denomination, which is to reach the world with the gospel. And so this is the 100th anniversary of the Cooperative Program. 1925, when the Southern Baptist Convention met in Memphis, they started the Cooperative Program then. And since its inception, has generated over $20 billion in resources to then fund various entities that include, what we call today the International Mission Board, the North American Mission Board, 6 Southern Baptist seminaries, the Southern Baptist Historical Library and Archives, the Ethics and Religious Liberty of the Southern Baptist Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, and the Executive Committee of the Southern Baptist Convention. So all of those are funded through the Cooperative Program that started 100 years ago.
How about that? And started where?
It was in Memphis, and so the convention meets once a year.
You ever been to Memphis? Yeah,
I have been to Memphis. I'm a native Memphian.
Yeah, that was the lead I was throwing you.
Okay. There you go. So, but yeah, so the convention meets every year. These days we meet in June, but back in those days they were meeting in May, and so for this particular convention they were meeting the week of May 13th, is when they met to form the Cooperative Program.
So what were the issues that came about that somebody said, hey, let's ding the bell. We got to have a better way to skin the cat here, or there's got to be a better way for us to do all of that. Surely there was some need that was arising or had that said, hey, was it just, hey, there's a better way to do this? Or was there kind of a problem or an issue or something like that that spurred this on?
Great question. So yeah, there's a couple of things that were happening in Southern Baptist life in the early 20s that led to the formation of the Cooperative Program. So first of all was the method for giving to support the various ministries. So you had the missions enterprises of the Southern Baptist Convention, which today we would know as the International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board. You also had, we didn't have 6 Southern Baptist seminaries at the time, but we did have, about 1925, I think we had 4 of the 6, or no, 3 of the 6. So you had a few things going on. First of all, the way that Southern Baptists were funding all of those things is what we would describe as a societal giving approach. So imagine this, you're sitting at First Baptist Church, and this week your pastor gets up and says, we have a guest from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, wanting to talk about what's happening at Southern Seminary, and we're going to take up a missions offering for them to help fund. And so you reach into your wallet and you give a little bit of extra money that week in the offering plate. 3 weeks later, your pastor stands up and says, "This week we have a missionary who's home from China, and they are serving with what at the time would have been called the Foreign Mission Board, and so they're home for a few months, and so we're going to take up a love offering and to help support international missions." And then a month later, your pastor gets up and says, well, today we have a representative from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas, and he's going to tell us about what they're doing. And so you can imagine week after week, month after month, you have representatives from all the various mission boards and agencies and entities coming through trying to ask for your money at First Baptist. And that's what they would do. They would travel all over, hit as many churches as they can, or hit, groups of churches. And so that's what we would call societal giving. They come in, they're representing their entity, their organization, and they're asking for money. So
it's kind of like grandparents who every grandchild has got some other we're selling light bulbs this week. The next week we're selling wreaths, and the next week we're selling greeting cards, and the next week and finally the grandparents are like, whoa, okay. I mean, every time I turn around, I'm buying something that I didn't know that I wanted because my grandkids are selling it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you can imagine that's what's going on. So in the process of what's happening is the funding, the various entities are not getting the funding that they need because, it's like, oh, I'm the seventh person this quarter to show up at this church. And the church's like, no, we gave, to the last guy. And so what happens in 1919, so this is the big historical lead up to it.
Okay.
What happens in 1919 under the leadership of M.E. Dodd, who was the pastor of First Baptist Shreveport for most of his career. But under M.E. Dodd and ultimately L.R. Scarborough, who was the second president of Southwestern Seminary, the Southern Baptist Convention launched what was called the 75 million campaign. So it's this idea that over a 5-year span, from 1919 to 1924, they were going to collectively raise $75 million in order to fund all the missions enterprises and the educational enterprises and all that kind of stuff of the Southern Baptist Convention. And so they received pledges right out of the gate, and over $90 million was pledged. But if you've ever been in a fundraising campaign, pledges don't equal dollars until the dollars are actually given. So 5 years later, 1924, they get to the point there's been a little north of $50 million that's been raised, which is a huge amount of money.
Sure.
But it's not the $75 million that was pledged. Well, the problem was that all the various entities had kind of taken out loans against the expected money they were getting.
Oh, wow.
Or they were thinking they were going to get. So now you hit 1924, you have various entities that are deep in debt because the money hasn't materialized to the level that they needed to. And so in 1925, what happens is L.R. Scarborough makes the final report of the $75 million campaign, again, announcing that they've come up short. And so they decide at that convention that even though the $75 million campaign was a failure in some respects, they raised over $50 million, though. And so they realized we can do more together than we can separately. And so they launched then the Cooperative Program, which says we're going to, just like we've done over the last 5 years, we're going to systematically pool our resources, and we give to a central fund. And so what a church will do is they give through their state Baptist convention, and then the state convention forwards a percentage of that money on to the executive committee based in Nashville. And then the executive committee then disperses it based on a formula to the various entities of the Southern Baptist Convention. And so from that failure of the 75 million campaign is birthed the Cooperative Program, which over the last 100 years has distributed over $20 billion to the various entities of the Southern Baptist Convention. So it's kind of, they took lemons and made lemonade out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah. And of course, in true Baptist fashion, there was probably more than one enough committee meetings going on.
I can only imagine the number of committee meetings.
When you say that the executive committee that is in Nashville, you mean that is the committee? Explain what that is for people that wouldn't know necessarily.
Yeah, so the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention is the organization that, and it's not a committee in the sense of like your church establishes a committee. It is an entity in and of itself. But the executive committee is what does the business of the Southern Baptist Convention when the annual meeting is not in session. So the Southern Baptist Convention as a convention only meets 2 days a year. For us, it's 2 days in June these days, 2 days in May back in the 20s. And so the executive committee handles all the business the other 363 days of the year. And so one of their main tasks is to distribute the funds as they come in via the churches through the state conventions to the Baptist building in Nashville. Then the funds are redistributed out to the various Southern Baptist entities, the seminaries, the mission boards, the historical library and archives, the ERLC, those types.
So if I am a member of the Greater Mount Nebo Baptist Church in, Palmetto, Georgia, okay, or whatever, and I'm going in and each week I'm putting in an amount of my tithe as well as my offering, right? And that goes then to I'm just trying to walk through the kind of the logistics, right? About kind of what that looks like. So let's just say I gave $100 that week, okay? And that got put in the offering plate. Then my church how does that money end up moving from my church to the state convention, and from the state convention getting rolled up to the national convention, to the executive committee? And how does that end up rolling back down to, let's say, Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest? How does that, walk me through that?
So what happens? You give $100. So your church has a budget that has been, adopted. And so let's just say that your church says that they are going to tithe 10% of their undesignated gifts to the state convention.
Okay.
So you've given $100, so that means 10% of that, so $10 is going to head to the state convention.
Okay.
Now, every state convention then has a budget that they've adopted that says we're going to use X percentage to fund what we are doing in the state. So we'll use Mississippi, for example. We've got 3 Baptist colleges in the state of Mississippi. We've got various other entities. There are, expenses to do local missions and things like that. So let's just say that the state convention has decided they're going to forward, we'll say 20% onto Nashville. So of your $100, $10 has moved to the state convention. And now of that, 20%, so $2 is going to head to Nashville. And so once the money gets to Nashville, there's then a formula that the convention uses. It stays relatively the same. There's some slight adjustments every few years, but for the most part, here's how that works out. So remember, $2 is going to Nashville. So of that $2, 50.41% is going to go to the International Mission Board.
Okay.
So they're going to get about $1.
Which has been set by the executive committee.
Well, no, it's been set by the convention.
The convention said, this is our formula, executive committee. We're not really leaving it up to you, which is so very Baptist, right? And so we're not leaving it up to you cats to be able to figure it out. Y'all can make sure it gets distributed, okay? But we, the greater, bigger messengers that have been sent to the national convention, we're the ones that are telling you what that formula is. And
right. Well, and I mean, the executive committee, any changes that are proposed usually come through the executive committee. They're making a suggestion, but they can't dictate it. It has to be adopted by the messengers of the convention. Okay. So a little over 50% goes to the International Mission Board. Just under 23% goes to the North American Mission Board. So right there, you're a little over 73%
Wow.
has already been distributed. So out of your $2, a little under $1.50 has been distributed now to the two mission boards.
Okay.
And then of what's left, 22.16% goes to what is referred to as theological education ministries. So the bulk of that 21.92% goes to the 6 Southern Baptist seminaries, and then 0.24% goes to the historical library and archives. 1.65% goes to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and then 2.99% stays with the executive committee. And most of that money is then used to fund the annual meeting that happens every year in June. So if we're, and then you get to you asked specifically about how it gets to a seminary. So So that's really the place where the formula even gets more complicated, because everybody else, they get their percentage cut. With the 6 seminaries, they get a total of 21.92%. But that 21.92%, that pie is divvied up on the basis of full-time equivalent enrollment at the various schools. And so now, which that means those 6 seminaries, their percentage does change every year, because they report on what their numbers are. All those numbers are verified. And then now it's done on a 3-year rolling average. So it's not going to be substantial change from one year to the next. But that's how so at the end of the day, Southeastern Seminary, my alma mater that you mentioned, out of your $100 that you gave at the church, we're down to about 40 cents that is going to get to the 6 seminaries combined. And so they're going to get, we'll just call it like 8 to 10 cents out of your $100. And that sounds like nothing, but if you take that across 12 million Southern Baptists, well, that 8 cents turns into a whole lot of money.
Well, for the ones that are tithing, right?
Right. Well, yeah.
Let's make sure
we won't say how many of those 12 million are actually giving money on a weekly basis, but
that doesn't stop me. That doesn't stop, because obviously Baptist ways that we structure, we're very bottom up oriented about about how that works. But let's just say, I don't know, a professor who heads up the Christian Studies department at Mississippi College decides to go to the First Baptist Boonville and wants to be able to talk about, and let's just say you're going to preach the sermon that Sunday, and the pastor's gone, and you're going to be, or is there, or whatever, and you're going to deliver a good sermon. And then you also know part of that is, we love what we're doing at MC. There's nothing that's keeping the person in the pew from going, I love what you guys are doing. Here's $50. Go knock yourself out and what you're doing.
Yeah. They could do that.
That's on its own, but you're not in there saying, I'm here to raise some money so we can keep the doors open, right?
Correct.
And that's kind of what the cooperative program differentiator is. It's understood, or it's laid out very specifically. Don't come bring it. You might have gotten away with it at Boonville, but you're not going to get away with it in Kosciuszko 2 weeks later, because they go, hey, dude, that's a no-go. Okay.
Yeah, which, that's a good example, even with the money when it goes to the state convention and then is redistributed. So MC gets about $2 million per year of cooperative program money from the Mississippi Baptist Convention. And so that's why when I go, if I'm at First Baptist Boonville, I'm gonna say, thank you for giving to Mississippi College, because your weekly giving that is then, sent on through the cooperative program, we get a portion of that to help us fulfill the mission of our university. I did the same thing when I taught at one of our Southern Baptist seminaries. I never showed up at a church with hat in hand asking for money. It was always I showed up saying thank you for supporting us, because even if they didn't realize the level at which they were supporting the various schools and entities, they're all supporting us. So a cooperating church that is giving, even if they're giving very little to the cooperative program, they're still giving something. And that ultimately it might be a small portion, but something out of every dollar given shows up at the various places within the Southern Baptist Convention because of the cooperative program.
And so that all goes back to what my church has decided that our percentage of that we're sending to the cooperative program back to the state convention, right? So we
Yep.
mentioned this $100 and the 10% is what my church decided. The other Baptist church 7 blocks down from wherever I am might turn right back around and go, well, we're not giving but 5. Okay. And another one may say, shoot, no, we're giving 15. We love what's going on. We love what's happening and we think that's a great thing and whatever, right? I mean,
it's voluntary cooperation, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, outside of believers baptism by immersion, you don't get a more Baptist concept than voluntary association with other Baptist groups. And so that's why your church can give 10%, somebody else's church can give 5%, another church can give 20%, another church can give 90% if they want to. And same goes with the state conventions. Some state conventions give 10%, some forward 20, 25%. There's a handful of conventions that forward 50% of everything that comes in. So it just depends, but it's all voluntary. And it's on the basis of that giving to the cooperative program that then your church can send messengers to the annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention. And so every church that gives something, like if your church gives $1, you get to seat 2 messengers. But but then based on amount given, then you can get up to 12 messengers at the Southern Baptist Church.
Gotcha. So that may mean it's all up to us. It's a percentage basis. Is that right?
To get messengers, it's a dollar figure.
Okay.
It's on a dollar figure basis, but what it does at the end of the day is the dollar figure is low enough that small churches with a little bit of sacrifice could get a full slate of 12 messengers, and bigger churches that have the ability to give more can't walk in with 300 messengers.
Yeah, right. There's a cap.
Mm-hmm. Very democratic, it's not a one church, one vote, but it's close-ish.
That's right. It gives you some parity at least to be able to, particularly if there's something controversial going on or other that you want to make sure that the larger city churches are not dominating those ideas and thought processes, and we're able to hear from the smaller rural churches as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of the way, and that's always been the concern, in anything that is, very democratic in nature, is that the majority doesn't run over the minority.
Right.
And so one of the things we deal with is not wanting the big churches, even though they're technically in the minority in total numbers, but they're not in the minority in total dollars. And so, you don't want, First Baptist County Seat Church that has, 5,000 members to have that much more of a say than Rural Baptist Church with 50 members.
Right.
Because especially when they're both faithfully giving to the cooperative program.
Right. Wow. Do you know, I mean, what really kind of differentiates the way that Southern Baptists do it as compared to what other denominations do it that are, I would say, more evangelical Protestant denominations, maybe in particular?
Yeah. So other denominations have their own funding mechanism and everything like that. But at the end of the day, what makes ours unique is that we are funding national level entities at a higher rate than most other denominations, and we're doing it strictly on a voluntary basis. And so the other denominations that are more hierarchical will tell you, okay, you have collected $1 million this year, your church has, you must send $100,000 to the denomination. And if you choose not to, you get zero support. We cut you off, you get zero support moving forward from the denomination, which in a lot of these denominations includes support for salaries, or a lot of these other denominations, they own property.
Sure.
So you think about it, in Southern Baptist life, every local church is autonomous. So no one owns the Baptist church's property except for that Baptist church.
Right.
No one sets their salary structure. No one can tell them what they can and cannot do other than that local church. Whereas if you're Presbyterian or Methodist or something like that, the diocese or the conference or the presbytery or whatever,
Whatever.
they own the property. So if you refuse to send money, they kick you off the property. Or they replace your pastor, or they come in here and say, you must do this. If you don't, we're going to take possession of everything that's here. And
Right.
you don't have any of that in Southern Baptist life.
Right, right. Or it's kind of compared to the way that a lot of Pentecostal churches, right? Or the pastor actually owns the deed to the property.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there is no conversation about where all that's going because I got the deed. Okay. And my guess is 90% of the pew sitters of any given denomination probably really don't understand how it all works within their particular denomination.
Right.
About what's
But you've seen some of this controversy, particularly, not to
No.
other denominations' dirty laundry, but you've seen some of this controversy with the United Methodist Church over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have some ethical and doctrinal issues, and that has led a whole host of Methodist churches to withdraw from the United Methodist Church. And I mean, it was part of their international global meeting. And so when these churches, like the Methodist Church down the street from where we're sitting right now, chooses to withdraw from the United Methodist Church, now all of a sudden their option is either to leave their facility or to pay for it. And so now they're collecting money, to pay off the United Methodist Church so that they can keep their property, because they knew the UMC at large knew these things were happening. They had struck a deal with churches to say, if you're going to leave, here's what you're going to have to do. But you don't have any of that in Southern Baptist life.
Right.
And so that's why it's called the Cooperative Program, because
Gotcha.
we are choosing voluntarily to cooperate with like-minded Baptists around the country to accomplish the mission of the convention.
It's not the "I told you so" and you better get in line program, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Get in line or else, right?
Yeah. In Southern Baptist life, it's voluntary on both sides. Voluntary association. So the national convention or a state convention or even a local association, they can also choose to disfellowship a church and say, we are choosing not to cooperate with you because of some things that you've said or done or something like that. In the same way that the church can say, well, we don't want to cooperate with the association or the state convention or the national convention because of something you said or did. Now, for the church to stop cooperating, all they have to do is stop sending money.
Yeah.
For the convention to choose not to cooperate, they have to actually take steps and vote a church, disfellowship a church, and there's rationale for that,
right.
Especially if that church is actively giving to the cooperative program.
That's another set of critters, okay, which is not our subject for today.
No, it's not.
About part of that to do. How very fascinating. That's really cool. Thank you for shedding some light on that, particularly with this 100th anniversary that we are I guess it was maybe yesterday, right?
Yep.
Was the 100th anniversary of
May 13th
came together. So anybody who is checking this out and you are not a Southern Baptist and want to know why in the world did they do it that way? How do y'all buy another bus? Well, here's a way that you can go figure that out. That this is kind of the way it kind of shucks out. It ain't coming all the way back from Nashville back to your church to buy that bus. If you want to understand why that seminary is able to add that particular program, or they're doing some other thing, it could very well be that some of those funds did come from your local church that ended up showing up that direction. So
so like a former president of a seminary where I work used to say, is he welcomed all Southern Baptists on campus. He said, because you own the place.
That's right.
It's yours. It's your money that is funding this institution. So in many respects, that's you're kind of a shareholder in a sense when you're giving money to your church and your church is sending it on through the cooperative program. You're essentially a shareholder in the process, and you can come to the convention and vote. And,
how about that?
Vote to raise the dollar figure or to support what they're doing more, and so that's
part of
the way
that.
it works.
Very cool. It's very interesting. We always learn something every time we do our Christian History Chronicle, which is what you're watching for our May episode of that. Stay tuned for what other Chronicles will be episodes. Also, if you're checking this out, we hope you're following our podcast and able to follow what we're doing on our Christian history this week. Dr. Evan Lenow, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing some cool information about funding mechanisms.
Great to be a part of this.
And thanks again for all you do for the center. We appreciate it. All right. Take care.